All right, Tennessee's got a game this weekend. Of course, that's exciting, but it's UT Martin. It kind of is what it is until you get back into SEC schedule. So we're going to talk recruiting. A lot of you guys have been wondering how this winning impacts the class of 23, 24, maybe even 25. So a little recruiting talk right here in store on your Thursday. Locked on Vols.
You are Locked on Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, everybody? Welcome into it. This is Thursday's Locked on Vols, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. That is your team every single day, and I'm your host, Eric Kane. Today's episode, it is brought to you in part by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props and odds and lines than ever before. BetOnline, it is where the game starts. Appreciate you guys for watching on YouTube. While you're there, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, the push to 5K, and pound that like button. Trying to get every video as many likes as we possibly can. And as always, anywhere you're listening to this podcast on those completely free audio podcasting platforms, really, really do appreciate that. I'm Eric Kane. I do for some recruiting work for the On3 site for Tennessee. That is volquest.com. I'm a staffer over there. And, of course, I'm your host of Locked on Vols at _Kaner on Twitter and at Locked on Vols. We got a big show coming up, but we're going to start off by talking some recruiting. And for that, we got to bring on a friend of the show, Mr. John Garcia, Director of Recruiting for Sports Illustrated. John, appreciate the time today, man.
Absolutely. Yeah. I figured we'd be talking this week after last weekend. Just unbelievable stuff really across the board. And obviously it's going to impact the future of that roster for sure.
Well, first and foremost, just as a football fan, I mean, I know you were watching that game. Like, what'd you think? I mean, that was a good football game. If you're a fan of defense, wasn't much of it, but a good football game.
Just had everything, right? I mean, just the drama, a big lead, a big comeback, a huge WTF moment, right? That scoop and score. I'm like, There's no way this is how it's going to end, right? There's no way this is it. So I'm glad there was a little bit more offensive input thereafter. Big missed kick. I mean, just the storming of the field. It was just a little bit of everything. It really felt like whoever had it last, even, 15 seconds, whoever had it last was going to win that thing. Two great quarterbacks that we're going to see playing for a very long time, it appears. Just a little bit of everything. And obviously getting that type of monkey off your back, 15-year monkey off your back, you just felt it. You felt it with every yard, with every tackle, with every touchdown, even every penalty, you felt it. And just huge for college football, for parity, for just the future. I think great for the East, for the SEC East. I mean, just so many good takeaways from that. And look, from the Bama side, they're going to be just fine, right? The path is still ahead of them. But yeah, I think there's always been room for that next program in the SEC, even in the modern age. And I think the Vols, stamped their place as that program with that win.
I mean, it's everything we love about college football, right? Yeah. I mean, it was just snapping of the streaks, two good football teams, good football games. Sure, it was an upset, but this is Tennessee's one of the best teams in the country, obviously. So the storming of the field, all that type of stuff, whole lot of fun. We got John Garcia on, courtesy of LinkedIn. Jaws, appreciate them for helping us out here, being the official recruiting sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network. Let's talk some 23s, a couple of guys who were on campus to take in that environment. David Hobbs, of course, the 5-star. He was actually on campus for Florida game and this Alabama game. Tamarian Parker, whose recruitment is always all over the place. Those were the two big fish Tennessee had on campus. And, of course, Samuel Mpemba on an official visit out there at Miami G Academy. What do you think about those defensive linemen? And, I mean, obviously it doesn't hurt to have an environment in a game like that.
Yeah, look, and I think we're getting close, right? Hobbs and Parker both set to come off the board in November, so great positioning to get them on campus for the biggest game of the year, obviously, in Knoxville with all that atmosphere. I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better setting for those prospects to take in. Obviously, Hobbs, as you mentioned, multiple visits to Knoxville. He's got a bunch of other trips ahead of his late November decision. That race feels like it's changing every day. But at this point, you got to feel good about Tennessee. I know Bama is set to get him right back on campus, I believe, this weekend. So there's a little bit of twist and turn there relative to his visits. But you got to feel good about the Vols' chances right now, right? At one point, locked to North Carolina, slows it down, opens it up, and now all of a sudden it appears as if the only certainty in this recruitment is that he's leaving the state of North Carolina for his college ball. It's just a matter of which big-time program is he going to suit up for there in the end. But again, Tennessee did what it had to do during this visit, and I think ditto for Parker, a guy who right when he decommitted from Penn State, Clemson had just offered and started really pushing for him. It just felt like, okay, we'll see if he takes visits, but probably Clemson's to lose. And that could still be the case. But I think Tennessee really made up some ground here. I think people forget just the proximity to the state of Alabama that really helps Tennessee recruit in that state, even way down in Phoenix City, where Tamarian is from. He's got a very short list of contenders still in there. I thought there were some notable programs left off of his list when he set his commitment date, particularly the in-state schools, and Penn State being on there does feel like a bit of a courtesy. So this could very well come down to Tennessee and Clemson. Which shade of orange is he going to rock at the next level? And I think going into that trip, it was probably still Clemson's race to lose, but how could you not reconsider after what you just saw and what you just experienced? I think in recruiting, Eric, we talk about one game windows not mattering very much. And 99% of the time it's true. But when it is a, break the internet, reshuffle the decks kind of win, momentous, historic, when it is something like that, a getting over the hump kind of win, like Georgia winning the Natty last year, Tennessee beating Bama last weekend, when it's something like that, Michigan beating Ohio State last year, when it's something like that, it really does have more of an impact. Same thing for A&M last year, beating Bama. They finished with the number one class after that run. It really shows tangibly things are so very much headed in the right direction, and it's more of a we just did it as opposed to we will do it. I think that does show some importance. So for those guys to be on campus for that game, I think really does say a lot. And then look, with Mpemba, you've always been a bit of a dark horse in one regard. I think different programs have held the buzz for Sam at different points. But look, Tennessee's starting to become more consistent of a program, whether he talks about visits, whether he talks about interest. Few programs can double down and push like Tennessee can when it wants to. Same thing with Carnell Tate, his teammate at IMG Academy. We know Tennessee is right there for these prospects. So I think with Mpemba, it's probably good news that he's a little bit further away from a decision than those other two defensive linemen that we just talked about with Hobbs and Parker. But you definitely helped your standing with all three of those prospects. I think maybe with Parker the most relative to the other schools still in it, because that list is just a little bit smaller. So if I'm a Vol fan, I'm keeping an eye on that one maybe most closely. But obviously Hobbs and Mpemba are still very much in play as well.
All right, so I can already tell I'm gonna have to keep you for one more segment. I'll get you out by your allotted time, but I've got a lot of great stuff here with John Garcia. One other thing before we hit a reset and we get you back on here to look at 24s, which is blossoming right now.
Sure.
The running back position for Tennessee, we've spoken on it many times. It's very unclear. Will Stallings, we'll see if he survives it, to put it bluntly, kind of. Kentucky commit Khalifa Keith is a guy that Tennessee will go and watch this weekend. Probably an offer's on the way.
Yeah.
Thought that Mississippi running back Dante Dowell, the Oregon commit, was going to be in town. He was not, but that's a name that's kind of been trending there a little bit. I feel like he needs to get on campus for it to be real. What do you think about the running back position for Tennessee in this class of 23?
Well, clearly the plan is to bring in a big back, right? I know even before that, Roderick Robinson was a guy that was being, under consideration one more time. So bigger, more physical downhill running back is kind of the goal, it appears, for Tennessee here down the home stretch. I think Keith is probably a more tangible option at this point. Yes, both of those other guys are verbally committed to other programs, but whether it's proximity to home and obviously, like you said, the staff going out to see him here in a couple days, it's really hard to think that won't be just confirming a scholarship offer heading his way. And all of a sudden, this is another Kentucky-Tennessee battle, which has gone overwhelmingly positive in the Vols' favor over the last year or so. And this could be, one of the bigger examples here down the home stretch for a kid from Birmingham, of all things. So I do think that if that offer comes down, it really becomes a matter of when, and maybe not if, that flip goes down. He was, back on campus, getting all the attention. And now I think there's almost a by design plan to say, hey, we were really busy this weekend, big game, a lot of recruits in town. Let's double down and reconfirm our interest in you, show out in the process. And I think the offer will hit a little bit more differently when it comes right off of a performance. So I do think that's a prospect to keep an eye on. And I think with Dowdle, committed to Oregon, as you said, Carlos Laughlin's done a really good job recruiting, his Southern territory where he's from. But look, he's starting to open the door a little bit more to SEC programs, right? Ole Miss was the original primary contender. Now it looks like he might try to set up a visit to Oxford. Mississippi State just offered him. That looks like it could be a trip that's set up. And then Tennessee's been in the mix right in the thick of it as well. So you want to reschedule the trip. You do believe, like you said, he's got to get on campus before something happens. But I do know the Oregon fan base and collective is starting to sweat a little bit with this recruitment, right? This is a Mississippi kid, again, a big physical back who profiles well in SEC country. So now if he's taking these visits, and it looks like they're going to be official visits, it looks like that's going to be something really to keep a close eye on here down the home stretch. And again, you really can't fault any offensive recruit in particular for taking a closer look at the Vols.
Yeah, no doubt. Hey, we got plenty more coming up next with John Garcia. Going to look into some 2024s because obviously it's not just about 23s. When you have a win like Tennessee had against Alabama, I mean, it's a measuring stick type game for visits where these 24s and 25s will say, oh, that was nice. But yeah, that Tennessee game against Alabama last year or whenever was really, really good as well. More with John Garcia that is coming up next. But hey, I want to tell you about Sweat Block, all right? So Chris, he suffered from excessive underarm sweat for about 10 years. He was so worried about sweating through his dress shirts that he started tucking maxi pads in his shirt to soak up that sweat until he found out about Sweat Block. Sweat Block changed the game for Chris, and it can change the game for you as well. Sweat Block was created by a doctor to help with his own excessive sweating. It is doctor created and it's doctor recommended. If you or someone you love is experiencing embarrassing sweat or odor, try Sweat Block. You can save 20% with the promo code Locked On at sweatblock.com. It's also available at Amazon. Listen, we live, the majority of people listening to this podcast. Now, shout out to all you guys who are on California and England and Wyoming and wherever you are listening to this podcast. But a lot of you guys listen to this podcast, listen right here in East Tennessee, okay? It is cold. It is cold here on a Thursday morning, but later on in the afternoon, it might get up into the 70s. I mean, the weather is ever changing. Your body having to adapt to it, sweating in those sweaters and those hoodies, all that type of stuff. Sweat Block can help you out, all right? Sweat Block can really, really help you out as well, just like it helped Chris. So if you or someone you love is experiencing embarrassing sweat or odor, try Sweat Block today. Save 20% with the promo code Locked On at sweatblock.com. Again, it's available at Amazon as well. Try Sweat Block. A good Thursday, everybody, and we're back in here at Locked On Vols talking some recruiting with our guy, John Garcia, the director of recruiting over at Sports Illustrated. John, we spent a little bit of time on some 2023s. One other one I want to ask you about, Arian Carter. Tennessee's going to try to get him on campus for the Kentucky game coming up a little bit. He was the one that blossomed with like 20 Power 5 offers in the span of a couple of weeks. What's the latest on Arian Carter? I think a guy that Tennessee would like to bring in and play a little linebacker.
Yeah, now it's visit time for him, right? He's setting up a ton of official visits. As you mentioned, Tennessee is going to get him on campus, the in-state school, which I think obviously, is going to lean heavily in the favoritism department for the current Memphis commitment. Look, Ohio State, LSU, Michigan, this has become, really the story of the football season, right? In terms of late bloomers, he's the guy. So for him to be, in Smyrna, in-state for the Vols, I think is going to be advantageous. We talk about all these great offensive recruits, but the defensive class at Tennessee is looking good right now. And obviously there's a couple of heavy hitters that are still available in theory before signing day come December. And Carter will be one of those that a lot of people, sort of judge the Vols on, right? If he's a late riser and he's in your state and you're this hot, you got to kind of go grab him. And I would imagine it's going to be really tough for other schools to pull him out. But he is taking a lot of visits all over the country here over, I think, starting this weekend. So he's going to start to really open his recruitment. And it kind of feels like a total reset, right, Eric? No disrespect to Memphis. This is going to be a total reset of a recruitment. And it's going to be a lot of big names and blue bloods coming after him all at once. But you got to feel good about Tennessee's chances when all things double down because of that proximity.
2024, Tennessee picked up its third commitment in that cycle earlier this week, or actually on Sunday. Actually, it had nothing to do with the Alabama win. He was planning on making his commitment already, but still, MJ Bennett, one of the top players from the state of South Carolina, an athlete that is turning into a nice receiver. What's Tennessee getting in a guy like MJ Bennett?
Well, you don't want to make the Jalen Hyatt comparisons because he's another slender receiver from South Carolina. But look, there's a lot of explosive ability in this kid's game. He's just a natural football player. Whether you lined him up at safety, corner, or wide receiver, I think he would be able to have success at the SEC level. There's an element of production there. He's got the two-way experience you like as a DB and a pass catcher, but I just really like how natural he is. I mean, he tracks the football so very well, instinctive after the catch. He's got great length at 6 foot, a guy who's going to fill out and become more physical with 2 years left of high school football. That's kind of a given, but I really like where his natural game is at this point. So if and when he does start to solely focus on the wide receiver position, that technical aspect's going to catch up here in a hurry. The polish, the route running, all that stuff is going to hit another level just in time for, when he gets to Tennessee for good. So I think this is a nice get for the Vols. I do think other schools are going to stay involved here because it's so early in tracking the class of 2024. But again, offensively with what Tennessee's got coming in and already has shown on the field, I think it's going to be tough to have him budge, especially like you said, since he was already kind of on board silently before going public with the pick.
All right, so there are always some of those players in every single class, especially in-state players, that you need to go ahead and get to jump in the boat early to kind of mold your class around either offensively or defensively to help be a recruiter for you. And one of the best players of the state of Tennessee for the class of 2024 is set to make his commitments Friday after his football game. That would be Lipscomb Academy's Caleb Beasley. It's going to come down between LSU, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, and Clemson. This is a guy that's been on campus as late as last week, a guy that has been, again, he's a Nashville kid, so it's easy to get over here, but he's been here a lot. I like Tennessee. I think Tennessee's in the driver's seat here. If Tennessee were to bring in Caleb Beasley on Friday, what type of get would that be? And kind of where are you thinking he's going to go?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think this is Tennessee's race to lose, especially with the upcoming verbal commitment on Friday. I think if it were to draw out and he were able to reset and maybe push it to official visit season, I thought that could potentially open things up for the other schools outside of the region. But yeah, I think the timeline, especially after that last visit, is really favoring the Vols at this point. And this would be a huge get. Not only a big name kid from a big name program, but going into Nashville is always been that too. Trent Dilfer, shout out there. Look, it's important to get Nashville kids. This is the Nashville and Memphis, from where I sit from a national standpoint, those are the areas where other programs have always kind of picked and prodded, right? Where you have to lock down if you're Tennessee in particular. And now as the profile of the Vol footprint grows, there's going to be more emphasis on those in-state kids. They've got to be more careful with the in-state kids that they truly target. But Beasley's been one of these long-time targets, no-brainer for the previous staff, the current staff, whoever's going to be on the new staff next year, whatever that looks like. This is a no-brainer, high-priority kid at a premium position at corner, which is, again, one of these spots where you need to see some improvement, right? It's been a great run, undefeated, all that stuff. You're going to be, if the rankings came out today for the playoff, you're going to be right in that race, but there's still work to be done on that side of the football and in the coverage department in particular. So I do think on that front, this is a very big deal for Tennessee looking ahead to 2024 as well. So he checks a ton of boxes at 6'1". Maybe he grows into a safety, but right now I do think he's got the technical ability and the hip fluidity to actually stay out as a big boundary type corner, which you need in this day and age with all these big receivers that go back shoulder, 50-50 balls, all that stuff.
Yeah, and if Tennessee does get him on Friday night when he does make his commitment announcement, they'll have to, continue to recruit and hang on to him because it's a long time away between now and National Signing Day. So we'll see what he decides to do on Friday night. I think Tennessee's in a good spot. John, thank you so much, man. As always, appreciate you being our guy, talking some recruiting what's coming up? What can we read on your behalf for the next couple of days heading into another football weekend?
Yeah, we're getting close to another weekend and close to another rankings update with the class rankings. We're seeing new commitments, a lot of decommitments since October started. I think the carousel is starting to pick up. So there's going to be a lot of movement here in October and especially November on the recruiting scene. So just gearing up as much as we can as we get a little bit closer to signing day.
John, appreciate it, man. Thanks so much.
Always a pleasure, Eric. Take care.
That is John Garcia of Sports Illustrated, the director of recruiting and scouting there. Appreciate John as always. Hey, we got more Locked On Vols coming up here in just a moment, but I want to tell you about BetOnline, the number one source for football and betting information this season. Find all the latest player developments, the team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game that you can possibly find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information, live betting, up to the minute scores for every single sport out there. Hey, Hendon Hooker in the Heisman race, second best odds over at BetOnline. Go ahead and check them out right there. See who he's behind and see who he's in front of. Second best odds, Hendon Hooker over at BetOnline right now for the Heisman race. The fastest, easiest way to check in on all your favorite games, events, Major League Baseball playoffs, football, Sunday Night Football, Thursday Night Football here tonight. Just regular football weekend, college football, MMA, boxing, and golf. It's got it all. Head on over to BetOnline or use your mobile device. Learn about all the latest trends and all the action. BetOnline, it is where the game starts. Just a couple of minutes left here on this Thursday edition of Locked On Vols. Appreciate your time here today. Thanks very much for hanging out. And we talked recruiting with John Garcia in segment 1 and 2. Tomorrow, we're going to catch up with Boogie Bentley of Talking Vols. Looking forward to that. And, of course, I'll give you my scout on UT Martin as we head into game day, noon Eastern. That's coming up on Saturday on the SEC Network, Tennessee and UT Martin. But for now, let's talk a little Heisman. There's been a whole lot of conversation about Hendon Hooker, the Heisman, and it's real. I mean, we're halfway through the season. Tennessee is 6-0, and heading into game number 7, where Tennessee should blow out UT Martin. When you look at the stats for Hendon Hooker, and it stacks up with some of the best in the country. Why? Well, because he is one of the best in the country. ESPN put out a Heisman Watch, updated its Heisman Watch after last week's games, and the top 5 candidates per the ESPN listing here. Number 1 is Hendon Hooker. Number 2 is C.J. Stroud, quarterback of Ohio State. Number 3 is Bryce Young, quarterback of Alabama. Number 4 is Dorian Thompson-Robinson, DTR of UCLA. Of course, he's a quarterback. All quarterbacks here. And number 5 is Caleb Williams of Southern Cal. And so I took all 5 of these per the ESPN listing, all 5 of these names, and I kind of broke it down, their exact stats, where they rank in certain of these statistics in the country, and what the odds are for them winning the Heisman per BetOnline. So I want to share some of those with you guys. Let's go in order with the listing here from ESPN. Number 1's Hendon Hooker. And this is according to their panel. He got 61 total points, 9 first-place votes. And this is what they have to say about Hendon Hooker. Hooker's been the breakout star of college football this season so far. His best came last Sunday against Alabama, finished 21-30 for 385, 5 touchdowns as the Volunteers beat the Crimson Tide for the first time since 2006. Well, here's Hendon Hooker's stats broke down, okay? In 6 games, Hooker's thrown for 1,817 yards. 15 touchdowns, 1 interception. He has a 91.2 quarterback rating, a 70% completion percentage, a 187.72 efficiency rating. That is second in the country. He's ran for 287 yards and 3 touchdowns. He plays for Tennessee with a strength of schedule of 12th in the country. And the big games remaining so far is, of course, Kentucky and at Georgia in the regular season. Currently at the BetOnline site, Hendon Hooker is plus 350 to win the Heisman. So those are kind of his numbers broken down. And I understand I'm going to be throwing a lot of numbers at you, especially if you're listening and not watching on YouTube. It's going to seem like a lot with you. So I'll try to be, I'll play the comparison game a little bit. Number 2 was C.J. Stroud. BetOnline currently has Stroud as the favorite to win the Heisman at plus 105. In 6 games, quarterback C.J. Stroud of Ohio State has thrown for 1,737 yards. That's almost 100 yards less than what Hendon Hooker's thrown. He does have 24 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He's thrown for quite a few more touchdowns than Hendon Hooker, but he's thrown 2 more picks, 3 interceptions. His quarterback rating, just a little bit better than Hendon Hooker's. His QBR, 94.4. He's completing passes at 70.6%. That is by a couple hundred decimal points, a little bit better than Hendon Hooker, but both those guys are throwing at 70% completion percentages. But his efficiency rating is tops in the nation at 207.57. Remember last year, Hendon Hooker had like the third best quarterback rating or efficiency rating in the entire country. Actually, quarterback rating and quarterback efficiency rating are the same thing. I learned that last year. QBR is the different one. But Hendon Hooker, again, a really nice quarterback efficiency rating. But CJ Stroud has the best one by a country mile at 207.57, where Hendon Hooker's is 187.72. More on Stroud, though. Here's where the two differ. He has 4 rushing yards so far this season, no rushing touchdowns. Of course, Hendon Hooker, 287 and 3 touchdowns. His strength of schedule as well for Ohio State is 82nd in the country. And the big games remaining on this schedule is at Penn State. Ohio State should wax them. And then Michigan later in the season. Of course, that's going to be a good one. Let's go to Bryce Young, who Tennessee, of course, just played and just beat. In 6 games, Alabama's played 7 games, but Bryce Young missed a game. He's played in 6 games. 1,657 passing yards, almost 200 fewer than Hendon Hooker. 16 touchdowns, 1 touchdown better than Hendon Hooker. 3 interceptions, that's 2 more than Hendon Hooker. His quarterback rating is at 86.1, which is significantly lower than Hendon Hooker's at 91.2. His completion percentage is significantly lower, and it doesn't seem like it's significant, but it is when you kind of break down the stats, at 67.2%, where Hooker's completing 70%. His quarterback efficiency rating is 14th in the country, where CJ Stroud is at 1, Hendon Hooker is at 2. Bryce Young is 16th in the country, or 14th in the country, at 167.2 is his efficiency rating. Now, on the ground, he's ran for 150 yards. That's a little bit less. That's significantly less than Hendon Hooker, but still 3 touchdowns. Alabama's got a good strength of schedule, of course, 6 in the land, and they've got Mississippi State and Ole Miss, the 2 big remaining games in the regular season for Bryce Young. So Bryce Young is considered a plus 2,000 for the Heisman Trophy at BetOnline. Let's go to DTR of UCLA, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, okay? In 6 games, the quarterback has thrown for 1,510 yards. That is significantly less than Hendon Hooker's 18-17. 15 touchdowns, that's the same. Thrown 2 interceptions, just 1 more of Hooker. His quarterback rating, QBR, is 88.4, where Hendon's is 91.2. His completion percentage is really good. He's completing passes at 74.8%. That's second in the country. That's 4 points higher than Hendon Hooker and 4 points higher than CJ Stroud. His quarterback efficiency rating is 180.58. That's 5th in the country. Remember, Stroud is 1, Hooker's 2, and now DTR is 5th. He does have 231 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns. Very comparable, more touchdowns on the ground than Hendon Hooker. Strength of schedule, though, 100th in all the land. And the big games remaining at Oregon, which will be a big one. If he balls out in a game against Oregon, that'll be huge. And then Southern Cal at the end of the season. So speaking of Southern Cal, let's go to our last one right here. This is Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams, according to BetOnline, plus 1,200 odds to win the Heisman. In 7 games played, he's thrown for more yards than any other quarterback on this list with 1,971. He has 19 touchdowns. That's 4 more than Hendon Hooker, but that's 5 less than CJ Stroud. Only 1 interception. His QBR is 86, which is solid, but significantly less than Stroud and Hendon Hooker. Completion percentage is way down there, 56th in the country, mind you, at 63.9% completion percentage. That'll dock him a little bit for sure. His quarterback efficiency rating, 162.29, that's 18th in the country. That's significantly down where, remember, Stroud's at 1, Hooker's at 2, DTR is at 5, and then you have Caleb Williams, who's all the way down at 18th. On the ground, Caleb Williams has rushed for 3 touchdowns on 235 yards rushing. Strength of schedule, 46th. Big games remaining is at UCLA later in the season. So, again, I threw a lot of numbers out there at you, but Hendon Hooker is not only comparable, but much better than the majority of this list for Heisman voters at ESPN. The list consisting of Hooker, CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and Caleb Williams. Really, it's kind of, in my opinion, it's CJ Stroud and Hendon Hooker that are going to be kind of going back and forth, but that strength of schedule for Ohio State, you can't hide it. Tennessee's is 12th in the nation. Ohio State's is 82nd, but we'll be on the road at Penn State, and then we'll have Michigan later in the year, so that will improve. So I wanted to take a little bit of a look there. I mean, of course, the big games remaining on Tennessee's schedule in the regular season. Kentucky will be no slouch. That's coming up after UT Martin. But all eyes are between the hedges in 2 weeks on the road in Athens. So that's going to be a big one. But yeah, I mean, Hendon Hooker's right there. I mean, right there. And when you talk about Heisman moments against Florida, playing Superman to win that football game was Hendon Hooker. Against Alabama, throwing for 5 touchdowns, 300 and whatever it was, 85 passing yards. That's, what do you do in the big stage? What do you do against the best teams? Hendon Hooker performs. CJ Stroud hadn't had that opportunity yet, right? He will potentially, but he hasn't had that opportunity. Bryce Young had that opportunity going up against Tennessee's Hendon Hooker playing counterpart. And if they would have won that football game, potentially Bryce Young would have been number 1 on this list, but they didn't win. So Hendon Hooker's in a real good position here. If he continues what he's been doing, no doubt about it, he will be at least a finalist and be going to New York with, hey, maybe a chance to win this whole thing. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Vols, your Thursday edition. Can't thank you guys enough for hanging out with me here today. Really do appreciate it. Making Locked On Vols your first listen, your first watch on YouTube. Please like this video on YouTube. Fill those comment sections up with whatever your thoughts are, and subscribe if you haven't already. Subscribe on any of your audio listening platforms, completely free. Can't thank you enough for that. And make Locked On SEC your second listen with Chris Gordy. Does a fantastic job who gets you set for the week around the SEC, the weekend coming up, rather. That's Locked On SEC with Chris Gordy. All right, that'll do it here for this Thursday. Appreciate you guys. Same time, same place. Pull up a chair, and we'll do it again tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, everybody.